I'm going to go through what we're going to cover this evening, but first we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And for our color guard, we have here Peter Connell, who previously served as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army and was on duty with NATO from 1962 and 1963. So here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. All right, good job, Pete. All right, your arm in. Okay, so let's see. Let me just do a quick rundown. We have a pleasant surprise guest this evening. That'll be Mr. Vincent Candelora, the minority leader in the House, I believe. In the meantime, we're going to have Armand Husko, who's going to be our first speaker. And then after that, we'll have Danielle Rhodes, who's an activist with a group called FAIR, which is the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. Then after that, will essentially be what this meeting is all about, which is Hank Koppel's work on crafting the legislation for parental rights. So he's going to walk us through the legislation. He will do his best to make it not a dry presentation. And then after that, we're going to have comments and a Q&A with Senator Rob Sampson. And then the anchor man who's going to bring us all home is going to be Bob McGuffey, who's running for Congress in the 4th District against, that's right, the communist, Jim Himes. So those things said, I just briefly want to sort of paint a backdrop for our being here. So I just need to bring to your attention things you've already seen in the news, which are motivating factors for why we're here. Let me offer the awful name of Merrick Garland, that he has started the process of calling parents domestic terrorists is unacceptable. They're not letting up, and guess what? Neither should we. So there's him. He's a bad story, but then we have another story almost as bad. His name is State Attorney General William Tong. Now, you may or may not be aware of the fact that several months ago he announced that he had signed on with 16 other attorney generals around the country for the purpose of, quote, protecting children's private rights involving transitioning and transgendering. The very idea, okay, that you're going to hide something like this from parents, it's repugnant, it's abhorrent, it's pathetic, yet that's what he wants to do, okay? So it's stuff like that that brings us here. Now I just want a show of hands. Who here has ever heard of the doctrine, the educational doctrine, parents ad litem? So a few of you know about parents ad litem. So just to briefly explain, I think of it as a doctrine where school systems are expected to act on behalf of the parents when the children are in the school system. Parents light, parents ad litem. So my bad joke is instead we have tyrants ad muchum instead of parents ad litem. But the point is, they've forgotten this, okay? When you're pulling stunts like this, you've forgotten your own doctrine. What's that all about? Okay, so those are my opening remarks. So first, we have a surprise visitor, which is, let's see, House Minority Leader, if I got that right, Vinny Candelora. So he's going to make a few opening remarks. Then we're going to hear from Armand Fusco, and he has quite a few things to say. Also, I just want to mention that this event is being treated as sort of a coming out for the Greater Education Council of Connecticut. You know, we're a group that's been meeting since January, roughly, and we are growing. We're making progress. We're involved in several projects. School safety is one. This is another, and we're definitely developing other projects as well. Our objective is to fill in the gap, a very big gap, when it comes to protecting the interests of parents and pushing for what would constitute a quality education. So for that, I hope you've signed our sheet, and that automatically makes you a member, and you can look forward to one of our newsletters soon. All right. So in the meantime, House Minority Leader Candelora, are you available? Oh, no, he's taking a pass. Okay, it is America. Okay, so then we're going to move quickly to Armand here, who has quite a few things to say. Thank you, Armand.
Don't clap, you haven't done anything.
You need the microphone?
Yeah, and I need the chair.
Chair.
Okay.
Do you want to hold this, Armin, or do you want it on here?
No, I'll have to hold it.
Okay.
Okay. Right? You want me to lift it up?
You want me to hold something?
Yeah, let's do it that way. There you go.
Oh, so,
Can you all hear me? Good. My remarks are to Rob Sampson, not to you, but you can listen. I'm sure Rob won't mind. Welcome to the battle of the minds of children, staff, and parents with many ideologies covering the educational landscape, but the racial agenda is paramount. However, every cause or ideology affects parental rights. First, what is ideology? It refers to the beliefs, customs, culture, and values that give to education in the curriculum, but it's changing to one based on racist agenda rather than traditional academic emphasis. You'll be surprised that it started with the publication, Dare the School Build a New Social Order, which is the left's commitment to using public schools to transform the minds of Americans' youth through social reconstruction modeled after the Soviet system. It preceded critical race theory because it was published in 1932. This is nothing new. The current ideology crafted at the university level as CRT has now infiltrated K-12 and uses race to activate the ideology. Why must parent rights be addressed? Because A.G. Garland's DOG has shredded parental rights by attempting to charge parents expressing concerns at BOE meetings as domestic terrorists. Despite his denials, such actions have already occurred. It's local law enforcement that has responsibility to deal with any disruption at BOE meetings, not the FBI. Interestingly, Judge Clarence Thomas, in a dissenting opinion, Brown versus Emma 2011, stated that parents have the right to educate and socialize their children. But the majority of justices at the time did not side with him, a clear erosion of parental rights. That's why legislators must codify their rights into law. What is the process for dealing with the racial ideology? You may not like this. If there's to be peaceful resolution, it must be win-win for both sides, or the divisiveness will continue, and it can be done with diversity, inclusion, and equity. How? Side-by-side school systems, either by the use of how buildings are used or how classrooms are assigned. This is where legislation would be needed that would require every district to have an anonymous and independent survey to determine which ideology parents pick, traditional or racial. Teachers would decide which ideology they would prefer. This could be sticky because there could be an overwhelming number for the smallest percentage and not enough for the larger percentage. Assignments must then be made by seniority, and it could require some staff layoffs. But there are teacher shortages to be filled just about everywhere. The survey should also ask if parents would prefer a charter school or accept a voucher. This could change percentages. A unique option is to have a district become a charter school district, as was done in New Orleans very successfully. A very, very large school system did it. Actually, any district can do that now. Maybe. Because the charter school system in Connecticut is an utter fiasco. Since it is the only state that requires legislation to fund a charter school and to start one. The only state. This reflects the power of the teachers union. Connecticut Mirror, May 15, 2023. No new charter has been started since 2015. But any district can fund its own charters with the public funds that they have allocated. Earlier, the legislators did their job by authorizing the state DOE to study the racial issue. 9 committees, don't ask me what they did with 9 committees, did so for many months and concluded that the only requirement is to offer a Black and Latino history course in 2023 as an elective at the high school, giving parents choice. This would seem fair to all and should not cause divisiveness. But some districts may make it a graduation requirement, and that would continue the divisiveness. Legislation would have to be enacted preventing districts from doing that, since it's circumventing the choice decision that the state DOE made. If such legislation cannot pass, those districts would be back to square one. Then it would be necessary for the courts to intervene. What may change the racial ideology, such as equity and social justice agenda being infused K-12 in every subject in Guilford, because it's modeled after the book by Ibram Kendi, a BU professor, How to Be an Anti-Racist, that Superintendent Freeman purchased for every staff member, an unheard of action by a superintendent to decide on the curriculum to be used. That's the responsibility of a district curriculum committee required to be established by the Board of Education, Public Act 10-220D, and that has not been done in Guilford. ESGA, in other words, is an unauthorized curriculum, but unless court or state action occurs, it remains in place. Fortunately, his mentor and his distorted racial obsession have just gone down in blazing flames with his fraudulent racial agenda. His toxic and discriminatory management culture and financial mismanagement of $30 million with nothing to show for it, except his entire department of 30 have been laid off. In comparison, he was busy making $200 million for himself. Will this make a significant change? My opinion, no. The racial advocates cannot admit that they were wrong. Court action is inevitable. The other significant issue is safe and secure schools, because they are not as safe as they should be and can be, with districts violating even the current school laws. For example, in 2012, each school had to develop a district safe school plan. And in 2014, each school building was to have its own safe school plan and a safe school committee. That was followed by PA 13-3, Section 86, which required each municipality to have an all-hazard plan in conjunction with the school plan. All are violations of law in districts like Guilford. They just don't pay attention to the laws. Furthermore, absent from almost all plans are 2 key requirements. The first responders must be included in developing the plan, and only 18 states require that to happen. Second, every threat must be analyzed by using a viable threat assessment, with the best one by the U.S. Secret Service, and it's available at no cost. However, missing from all plans is that the staff and students have absolutely no way, none, to isolate and disable a shooter except to run, hide, and do Houdini magic by escaping from locked rooms. That was an editorial in Sunday's Current. After 2 years of research, I published Does Your Child Attend a Safe School? It provides everything policymakers need to know to fix safe school plans. The reality is that the first responders are the staff and students because they face the shooter first and they need the means to defend themselves and even go on the offensive. Therefore, I provide a non-lethal plan for students and staff to isolate and disable a shooter. It consists of talking doors and window doors, self-defense, non-lethal weapons, and corridor gates, and it's not costly. Shamefully and tragically, all 364 shootings had some type of warning by the shooter, and all administrators disregarded the warning signs as it does not make a school look safe if a threat is published. As an example, recently a student in Guilford High School walked into the building all day wearing a gas mask and did so with no one stopping him. Students took pictures, and when the administrators found out, they asked the students to delete them from their phones. That's unlawful destruction of evidence, and yet they got away with it. One serious problem is that the statutes do not provide consequences for failure to enforce the laws, meaning that apparently the legislators do not have a process for ensuring that laws are implemented as intended. But there is a legal consequence known as malfeasance of office. When a government entity does not implement state laws, and when such violation occurs that results in harm, it becomes misfeasance of office. Why doesn't the AG enforce the violations with this procedure? Has there been harm? 3 court cases allege such harm, with 3 parents suing on behalf of their children who were bullied and were not afforded the school protection of the bullying laws, violating their own policies. In addition, a 1968 U.S. Supreme Court decision, Epperson versus Arkansas, prohibits schools from offering only one dogma. Why isn't this decision being used to stop the racial agenda? Where is the Connecticut AG? So what are the vaccines to deal with the toxic ideology? Some have already been mentioned, others are available right now, and some may require court or legislative vaccines. The first, parent power using parent rights. What is needed is a Connecticut Parent Advocacy Center created by legislation to support those parents who have the right to a neutral curriculum free from promoting any causes. 32 states have codified parent rights, up from 18 in 2022. Close failing schools. They are the epicenters of racial problems, not the suburbs, where students are forced by law to attend a failing school, meaning they are held in bondage. That is modern day slavery, and they talk about past slavery when we have current slavery. The Connecticut Reform Act of 2012 had a process for turning around failing schools. There seems to be no evidence that even one has succeeded. Therefore, there should be legislation that every failing school should be closed in 3 years and converted to charter schools, and that every district must be allowed to have 1 or more charters. Have the AG enforce the U.S. Supreme Court decision of 1968 in malfeasance in office to remove an official for failure to perform an official duty, such as enforcing education law. Governor DeSantis in Florida invoked that law and removed a Board of Education official using malfeasance of office, so it can be done, and it is being done. As a legislator, you can at least give voice to these issues, because the Rip Van Winkle media has been asleep at the wheel since they have not reported on any of these issues. The research has been done and documented, and it's all found on that table. Now see what you can do to stop the indoctrination of students to this ideology and other causes from infecting our schools, and give parents the rights they deserve. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Almond. I think we can all agree that was quite a bunch of material to take in. So hopefully you'll have, well, by one means or another, if people are interested and they want to study what he had to say, we'll make it available to you. That you can be sure. So the next speaker is Daniel Rhodes, and she's a part of an organization called FAIR, which is the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, and she can certainly explain that more. So she's going to offer up some of her thoughts and experience from her years as an education activist, and which will help lead us into Hank Koppel's presentation. So Daniel.
Hi there. I've never been described as an activist, so that's weird, but I'm about action, that's true, and so I think I'll just tell you the things that have worked. These are like very specific things that you can take home to your districts and put into place immediately. Whatever's happening in your district, there's usually a policy that they're breaking. And if you write a letter pointing out the policy, it's very simple. They stutter, they pause, and they stop. I mean, the pushback does not have to be riots in the street. It doesn't have to be people out there, you know, screaming for change and all of that. It's been weirdly easy. We send letters, the boards respond. If they don't respond, yes, we do have our sort of arm of FAIR, and generally there are people that are maybe with other organizations that will come and sort of make phone calls, come to the Board of Ed meetings, have those conversations that you see televised often, but it doesn't always need to come to that. I mean, and one example, a tangible example, is in Somers, Connecticut, which is far north of here. It's a very conservative town, and yet they were proposing a DEI professional development day that would rival Guilford's, okay? And we got a hold of that information before it happened and pointed out how it was violating various different things in their policy, presented that to the community, and they immediately dropped the entire professional development day. Sometimes the language, much like the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, sounds like now it's some sort of like trigger for people. We're just trying to get Martin Luther King's principles back in the ideology. That's what we stand for. And yet, but it's an excellent way to get your foot in the door. So one thing you can do is you could join FAIR. It's me. I mean, to be honest, it's very grassroots. So if you join, I will get your email. You will only hear from me every quarter or so. You'll hear from FAIR National a lot. They send out, you know, emails and newsletters and all of that stuff. I don't do any of that. I am very focused on Connecticut-centric issues and supporting whoever is in the breach. So whether it be our new group here or No Left Turn, Moms for Liberty is having a function the 21st. I'll be there, and I support them as well. I will support anyone that is willing to stand up and say, this is not good for children, this is not good for our society, we need this to stop. And every single person in the room can do the very same thing, and you don't have to be divisive. I mean, that's sort of like FAIR's position is we're nonpartisan, and indeed I have many classical liberals among my group that have come to FAIR to say, you know, I was okay with this, but they've crossed a line here, and those are the people we can speak to right now. So I think that, you know, my suggestion to all of you is participate. Hank asked me to say to sort of give an update of like what FAIR is doing in Connecticut, and then also how I think we can help with their proposed legislation. And I think that every person in the room can just participate. I mean, I'm running for town treasurer, and I've recruited people to run with me. I think part of this is our problem, right? Like, I was just coasting along, being a mom. Somebody calls me an activist, I'm like, what? I'm just a mom. I don't even understand that. But I think that's how it gets done, right? Like, we turned a blind eye, or maybe thought it was all okay, and it's not. The other really important thing to say is there are teachers and school counselors. There are two in the room. There's a professor. That's my husband. Full disclosure. I'm married to a UConn NEAG professor. He's basically in the belly of the beast, if you ask me. He's there with all the crazy people that are teaching the teachers that this is the only way that you can possibly think. And he's there saying, actually, not really. And it's really powerful that we have one, it's one, but he's there. So I brought him tonight, and at the Q&A, please ask him questions. We just met one of his students that surprised us and is here tonight. She's in the back there, and she's a school counselor. So, school psychologist. I think that's really important to understand that not all, half of my family are teachers. I would say probably 50% of FAIR, maybe not 50, that's an exaggeration, probably like at least 10%, I'd say, of my FAIR membership are teachers. And I work with teachers all the time that are struggling to understand how they can stay in the school and protect the children from the insane ideology. So that's the other thing, is like vilifying all the teachers when you're not clear on who they are and what they stand for is a mistake. It's a huge mistake, because we're losing teachers. The really good teachers are the ones that are like, you know what, I can make money somewhere else doing something else where people value me, and they leave, and generally they tend to be the people that agree with us because they've had enough and they can't take it anymore. We need to help them to be able to sustain and stay there, so that when all of this, when the pendulum swings the other way, hopefully not too far the other way, we still have those really important teachers that will be able to show the other teachers the way. I have a very young teacher that literally came into our school. She was a music teacher, did not understand she was doing anything wrong, and yet she was preaching to the kids this ideology. And the superintendent pulled her aside, the principal pulled her aside, said, hey, this is not acceptable. And she couldn't wrap her head around it, because sadly at my husband's school, at UConn NEAG school, they had drilled into her, this is the right thing, this is what good people do. And we had to kind of deprogram her. Sadly, she did leave, but maybe for the best, right? I was hopeful that she's so young, she didn't know any better. So that's the other thing, a lot of these really new young people, it depends on where they've graduated from and what year they've graduated from. You can kind of tell. And so I have a whole sort of work, I guess, like toolkit that I've actually written for a different organization, not for FAIR, called 21CT, that details like step by step. If you want to know like what you can actually do, tangibly do, look at the policy. That's something you do at the board level. But more important than any of this is to talk. You can immunize your children with truth. And that's what I would say. Speak the truth to your children. They're going to be exposed to this stuff. Tell them exactly what to look for. Tell them why it's not right, why we feel a different way, and they will come to you. My daughter started school for the first time this year after being homeschooled since 3rd grade. She started as a 10th grader. She came home and just dumped on me, Mom, I can't believe it, but they had a trans flag in line. She's like, she literally said, there's no country, right? Because it was in the AP World History, and it was up like next to the other countries, and she was just checking, like, I don't think I remember hearing that, but am I right? I said, no, there's no country, but that's obviously his tell of like, he's trying to be supportive, and also I didn't demonize the teacher when she told me that, because I think it's important to be fair, it's in the name, right, to people and give them a chance. Like, maybe he's trying to support a student and he's trying to be empathetic. Maybe that's what's going on there. That's what I told her. I said, let's not put him in the bucket of he's on the wrong side. Let's just think, maybe he doesn't really understand what that means to you as a conservative. Maybe he doesn't understand how that impacts you. And so I think I'm so proud of her, and I'm so proud of my husband and his student back there, who are standing in the breach, and they're doing the really hard work. So anyway, please join FAIR. You will just get me. If you join FAIR Connecticut, it's me. I also brought cards, and my husband is back there, and we'll be here all night. So if you have any questions, please reach out. I have lots of specific things that you can do. If you have a problem, I'm really good at sort of like, FAIR might not be able to help you, I might not be able to help you, but I'm definitely sure I know who can help you, because I've been at this since summer 2020. So I'm really, really well connected with who's doing what well. And so I'd be happy to just get you going in the right direction with any issues you have. Yep. It stands for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. Just as Martin Luther King stood and said that's what he's for, that's what we stand for.
Well, thanks for the last conversation. And I mean, lots of practical advice from experience that she's had. So next up is Hank Koppel, the former federal prosecutor, who has done yeoman's work in putting together this proposed legislation. I think we can all agree that it's still a work in progress, but I'll try it this way. My father liked to comment, he was a chemical engineer. He would finish a project and then someone would come along and criticize what he did. So he would just look at the person and say, where were you when the page was blank? Okay, well, the page on this is no longer blank.
Thank you, Court. I just want to start by giving thanks to everybody. First of all, this room is filled with parents and citizens who've been trying to bring back common sense into the schools. God bless you all for your efforts. It's fantastic. It's not a short battle, as I'm sure we've all experienced. It's going to be a long one, but we're going to hang in. I want to thank the Greater Education Council of Connecticut, Court, and Dave Holman, and the rest of the crew, because this is kind of one of our opening big events. It's fantastic. We hope to make some positive, good change in Connecticut in the years to come. Thanks to all the representatives who are here today from the legislature, and Senator Sampson, thanks for taking the time to come in and talk with us and hopefully give us some guidance and inspiration of how we can take this thing and make it happen. And thank you to Danelle from FAIR, a great national group fighting this battle all over the country. So as Court said, it's a funny position because I recently retired from the Justice Department, so the only record I might break in the world is the fastest transformation from federal prosecutor to federal terrorist going before school boards. Hopefully that circle won't be completed on part 2. Why are we here, and why am I here to talk about a statute? I'm sure, like a lot of you who've found, well, let me start this way. In our town, we saw in the budget a couple years ago, neighbors and friends of mine who are in the room too, from the Amity School District in the Woodbridge, Orange, Bethany area, said, hey, they put a budget item in for a DEI counselor. Okay, do we really need a DEI counselor? You know, we got other stuff. Let me just preface by saying, everybody here believes in the American principle of e pluribus unum. We come from all races, backgrounds, faiths, creeds, and colors, and we're all Americans, and God bless that. This is not against that. This is against the distortion of that noble principle. For goodness sakes, America was the country that basically founded that principle in our Constitution. We're here to just preserve it against those who would usurp it. So we saw this happening in Woodbridge, and we started getting active. We've been now for 18 months going before the school board, talking about the programs they have, appearing and speaking to the school board, doing FOIA requests, writing petitions, signing them, submitting them, and so far, they haven't budged a millimeter. They haven't budged a millimeter. We're going to still keep trying. Let them know we're out there. We're watching. We care. But a few of us said, you know something, we probably also need to parallel those efforts at the state level, like Florida has done, like some other states have done, like the group No Left Turn has done, and others in FAIR. So, being a lawyer who was retired, had a little too much time on my hands, I took a shot at it, talked with the group, and we came up with a proposed first draft statute. All I want to do is just talk about a few points of what's in it, and then look forward to hearing from Senator Sampson, candidate McGuffey, and others. How can we make something like this happen in Connecticut that's good, fair, constitutional, that can make things better? The statute draft itself is on the far back table under the big screen there, along with a short explanatory memo. Thank you, Danelle. This is not a final thing, as Court said. So what does it do? Basically, it tries to do 4 things for our schools. 1, it prohibits discriminatory ideological indoctrination and what we would call compelled speech. Because under the First Amendment, you cannot force someone to say something as that's true. That's not our First Amendment rights. It's teaching and staff training and in hiring and promotion decisions. So it would prohibit curriculum content and employment decisions that require or compel belief in these forms of what most call racial essentialism and DEI principles. Just going to read a few because I don't want to go on long here. So it says things like subjecting any professor, teacher, or student to training or instruction that inculcates or compels such individual to believe or endorse any of the following concepts. That's compelled speech. It violates the First Amendment. And it's contrary to the educational mission, which is about open minds debating and discussing. Things like members of one race, color, or sex are morally superior to members of another race, color, or sex. An individual, because of their race, color, or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or is otherwise inherently oppressed. It goes on and on with things like that that we're seeing around the country. It says that's the stuff you can't do. But you know what you can do? The statute clearly says, nothing in this shall prohibit discussion of slavery, racism, Jim Crow, civil rights movement, ongoing disparities and discrimination. This thing is insulated against the First Amendment challenge for good and right reasons. And so people will be saying, you're banning this, you're not allowing that. It doesn't. So anyways, that's the first part. It's based closely on the Florida and the no left turn statute. The second part prohibits lobbying and political activism for academic credit. Why would we do that? I didn't want to have this in there, but there's a lot of research around the country that lobbying for academic credit is being used only for one ideological stripe. There's so many stories where a kid says, I want to lobby in favor of abortion rights. Okay, you can do that, you get your credit. Then another kid comes up and says, I'm pro-life, I want to lobby for the pro-rights side. Sorry, you can't do that. No. So this is happening around the country. I'm not even stating a position on this. I'm just saying you cannot do that in a school. The kids can do it on their own, that's fine, but teachers cannot compel kids to do that stuff. Thirdly, and next to last, it assures factual balance in the Connecticut Ethnic Studies Statute. Hey, ethnicity is a story of America. We all got great stories of our forebears from different countries and places, and all had various battles to make it here in America, right? But the Connecticut Ethnic Studies law says to teach only Black and Latin American and Latina history. Those are important stories. They're part of the American fabric. But they're not the only part. This says, if you're going to teach ethnic studies, teach them all. And, you know, the idea here is to not create this oppressor-oppressed kind of rubric, but rather to talk about our common humanity from all our groups. Lastly is parents' rights. It basically incorporates U.S. Senator Josh Hawley's statute that went through the Senate some weeks ago, saying that parents have a right to see, to know, to access what's going on in the schools, and no medical intervention other than a true blue emergency, got to do the tourniquet or whatever. Other than that, parents got to know before they intervene, including kid says, I'm not longer this gender. Parents got to know first. So that's it. I'm hoping Senator Sampson and Rep. McGuffey, candidate, if you want to tell us how we can make something like this happen. And I'm sure over time we'll have to get a better draft, a better statute, but we'd like guidance because we're parents who've been fighting these battles for a year and a half, 2 years or more, and we want to do it right. So I'm just going to close by saying, in my book, we are the ones defending Martin Luther King's noble legacy. The ones who oppose this are trying to throw it in the trash basket, and we're not going to let it happen. Thank you.
All right. Okay, again, thank you very much. So he is the architect, dare I say the engineer, for this. And it's something that the Greater Education Council of Connecticut will be pursuing and developing, and we're going to want to get more people involved in different phases of it. So I hope this grows into something that will have real impact. And speaking of impact, now it's time for Senator Rob Sampson. A man who needs no introduction.
Thank you, Court. Let's hear it for our previous speakers. Armand, Court, Hank, and Danelle. Great job, folks. We're all here tonight, obviously, because we, share similar values and principles. And I'll say right at the outset that I'm very impressed with the turnout. I didn't know what to expect tonight. I go to a lot of these things, and I find myself, staring at 3 other people. And it's disappointing. Those are usually my fundraisers. Seriously, but there are a lot of good people across our state and across the country that are awakening every day. And I think more and more people are starting to learn that our culture and our society is in, I hate to say it, a state of decline. And I think that is the driving force behind people getting involved and showing up at events like this, because they're very concerned not only about their individual futures, but the future of their children and their grandchildren and the future of this great country. And we've witnessed a horror show over the past several days of what can happen when you have cultures and societies in conflict and in decline across the world. And I'm very concerned about the direction of our country. That's what led me to run for office. back in 2010 when I first got started. And I'm driven by the same thing then that I am now. And I'll tell you, it's been frustrating spending 14 years in the legislature, essentially banging my head against the wall, but trying to be the voice for a certain set of principles, often knowing that it's a losing battle. We're not going to win. There's no way. Samson, you're going to go out there and make some speech, but nothing's going to happen. And that's right. But someone has to be on the record. You know, someone has to make those points. They have to live on. Someone somewhere is going to hear them and carry on that message. And if there are people not willing to carry that message, those messages die. I speak at a lot of political events, and my great concern really is about preserving the Republican Party, because I believe the Republican Party is the only mechanism left to change the future direction of our country. And unless we have a viable Republican Party, we are not offering a viable alternative to the Democrats. And I'm afraid that in many parts of the country, right here in Connecticut in particular, that we don't have a strong Republican Party, and therefore we are not giving people a choice. And you can look at parts of this state, Fairfield County in particular, where we haven't fielded any strong Republicans in a long, long time. And when you go down there and you listen to the Democrats and the Republicans, they sound the same. And nobody's talking about the Constitution, no one's talking about freedom, no one's talking about the principles that made America great. And those values are being lost as a result. So I'm here for a lot of reasons tonight. Obviously, this is an issue that's near and dear to me. Along with several of my other more conservative colleagues in the legislature, we have tried to make sure that the voice of parents and freedom-minded people across our state are heard when it comes to how education is delivered in Connecticut. And I didn't intend to talk very long, because I know that you guys came here because you want to be involved, you want to find solutions, you want to be activated to make change in the world, and I don't want to talk at you. But I want to just speak a few maybe difficult truths to begin with. And the first one is that there is no one coming to save us. A lot of people go around talking about the next great thing that's going to happen that's going to save us. For the last several years, it's about the 2020 election is going to be overturned any day now. They're going to have a victory in court. The election's going to be overturned. Trump's going to be president again, et cetera, et cetera. People are always relying on electing a new person. We're going to get this person in place, and that's going to fix everything. Right now, I'm all excited. I was really hoping we were going to get Jim Jordan to be our speaker. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. But even Jim Jordan is not going to change the world. And Trump, becoming president again is not going to change the world. No one's coming to save us. We live in the greatest country on earth, mainly because of one reason. There are a lot of reasons, but the main reason, I believe, is that we have something nowhere else has, and that's representative government. Truly representative government, where the people hold the power. You guys know, a constitution of, for, and by the people. And that means that we get the government that we ask for. And it's a hard truth that people need to realize that the government that we have is the government that people are asking for. Now, not the people in this room. And one of the things that I find most difficult when I talk to a lot of people in settings like this is getting them to understand that not everyone thinks like us. That not everyone is going to be moved. There's a bumper sticker floating around the room that says, Rosa DeLauro is a communist. Now, many years ago, it might have been very effective to go out there and say, Rosa DeLauro is a communist, don't you dare vote for her. And people would have been concerned about that. And they might have said, oh my God, we can't have a communist in office. But today, there is a whole world of people out there that think communism is a good thing. I'm here to tell you, people come to the legislature, they come to public hearings, they start their comments by saying, I am a proud communist. They say that. They say it completely unafraid, and they say it in a way that is trying to encourage others to join them in their worldview. They say it in a way I wish people got up and said, I am a proud capitalist. And I love my system of free markets because that's what creates wealth and opportunity. How often do you hear people say that? Not enough. Anyway, I'm going on a rant. So forgive me for that. So I wrote a few notes down that I wanted to cover. No one is coming to save us. I already said that. But the point is that it's the people in this room, us. We are the only thing standing between the future destruction of our society. That's it. Because if it's not us, if we, the people that are actually awake and know what's happening, are not going to take action, it's going to go away. So we have to do so. And I commend every person that's here, because you've done so much more than a lot of other people that might have been in your shoes that said, I'm going to stay home and watch whatever on TV tonight. So thank you for doing that. But we want to take the next step. And there's a lot I can say about it, but I'm kind of focused tonight on the legislation that is being proposed and how we can move this forward. And I'll just say that, going back to representative government, it's not enough to just elect good people to public office, because you can elect good people to public office. The best lawmaker in the entire state of Connecticut is here tonight. That's her over there, Representative Gail Masterman. If you like me, you love her, because she is 10 times more fierce than I am. Trust me when I tell you, I would not mess with her. But Gail will tell you, same as me, we are outnumbered. We are outnumbered in our own party. So just having us there, fighting for those values and principles is not enough to get us over the top. And even if we could, behind closed doors, and we often do, convince our colleagues that we're right. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been in the Senate Republican caucus room and convinced everyone else that a particular bill is good or bad, only to have us walk out on the floor and everyone cast the exact opposite vote. I cannot tell you the number of times. And that all goes back to representative government. It goes back to their fear of their constituents, their fear of the reaction of the news media, how difficult it will be to go back to their district and explain their vote. The example is this year, we had a state budget, one of the worst state budgets I've seen. How many budgets have I seen? 7, I think? This may have been the worst one. And yet it passed the state Senate 35 yeses to 1 no. This state budget was 850 pages long, 400 plus sections of the worst far-left progressive nonsense you have ever seen. Healthcare expansion for illegal immigrants. Right there, that's enough to vote no. If you're a Republican lawmaker, that should have been it. Right there, you don't need to know anything else. A 9% increase in spending. 9% increase in spending, which also means a 9% increase in taxation, because that's where money comes from. Baby bonds, a program effectively to create wealth for people that are not even born yet, paid for by the people in this room, and backed up by taking a fund for teachers' retirement. They took the money from there to fund the baby bonds program. I wish I knew I was going to mention this, because I could go through the entire list of items. And I did on the floor of the Senate. I went through, talked for about an hour, and went through all the terrible items that are in this bill. And at the end of the day, it passed 35 to 1. And the reason why it passed is because they put the tiniest imaginable tax cut in this bill. They cut the state income tax, first time ever, by the way, so they can say it's the largest income tax cut ever, because it's the only one. It's the equivalent of around $150 over a calendar year for people in the 2 lowest income brackets, while simultaneously raising taxes on them and everyone else in countless other ways. No one will actually realize anything that resembles a tax cut. But the Democrats were prepared to go out and say that they were going to pass this tax cut, and the news media was going to say that there was a tax cut, and then the House voted, and all but 12 courageous Republicans, including my friend Gail over there, voted no. everybody voted yes, rather. 12 people voted no. And that was it for the Senate Republicans, who the night before were all voting no. We were all unified about how we were going to go out there and we were going to tear up this budget and we were going to set the record straight. I was the only one to go out there and talk against the budget. But it's easy to get down on my colleagues, and I do sometimes. I get angry with them for not standing up and doing the right thing sometimes. But I also understand that they're operating on their understanding of a representative system. They want to do what their constituents expect them to do. They want to do what their constituents, or what would please their constituents, let's put it that way. And that's why they make the decisions they do. And it's because, as I mentioned, they're afraid to go back and explain, well, you know, I know there's a tax cut, but there's these other things. That's difficult, that's hard. And not everybody is prepared to do it. So anyway, the thing about this legislation that we have before us, and I've tried to propose very similar legislation myself in recent years, is that you've got to overcome a lot of obstacles in committee. The first thing is that because the Democrats control both the House and the Senate, they also control the chairmanships of every committee. So every committee in the legislature, whether it's the Insurance Committee, the Appropriations Committee, the Education Committee, and so on, they are all controlled by the Democrats. There's a House chair and a Senate chair. And those two people decide everything that happens effectively throughout the legislative process. So when an individual lawmaker like myself presents a bill, it goes to the nonpartisan staff, they draft it up, they send it to the appropriate committee, and those committee chairs decide what happens with it. So if it's a bill that they don't like, obviously it goes immediately into the round file. So that's our first obstacle, is that generally speaking, bills that they don't want to talk about, and we can talk about the reasons why they might want or not want to talk about things, but they immediately disappear because they don't want to have the conversation. The conversation's uncomfortable. The press might cover that conversation. They don't want to be on the record voting against things that are going to upset people, including the people in this room. It's a lot easier to get by. It's a lot easier for those weak Republicans and for Democrats to convince their constituents that they're good people if they never have to take those hard votes on the things we might actually care about. So that's the first thing that happens. Worse than that is if there's a bill that they actually like, proposed by law, they will just tear mine up and write a new one and put their name on it. And it happens a lot. But we've got to overcome that obstacle first, because barring getting an actual hearing on a bill, because that's the first step in the process. Get a hearing. After a hearing happens, you know, the public will come, there'll be public comment and so forth. Then there's an opportunity to vote, but only if those chairs allow it. They can often have a hearing and then never bring the bill up for vote. And then if a bill happens to get voted out of committee, then it has to be brought up in both chambers, passed by both of them, and then on to the governor, et cetera. You guys know how that process works. But along the way, there are many stops that come up where somebody can say, well, we don't really want to put our members on the record on this. And that happens a lot. Just as an aside, one thing that I thought was very interesting in this whole speaker debate was the fascinating rule that we have in Congress that allows any single person to make the motion to vacate the speaker. And it's very interesting. I heard one of my former Republican colleagues, who happened to be a House Minority Leader at one time, talking about how that's the most terrible and crazy thing on earth. And I thought that was so typical of her. Because only people that want to rule without being checked or challenged would think that's a bad idea. If you don't have the votes, you shouldn't be there, in my mind. So, sorry for indulging my aside. So anyway, my intent was to just talk for a few minutes and then kind of open things up to questions. And I figure we can talk about a lot of things. We can talk about the things that I'm going to be very helpful at in this process, which is the process itself. I know the legislature inside of it. I know how to get a bill passed. I know how to get support from both parties. I know how to use leverage to make things happen. But the one thing that we are absolutely in dire need of is the public. We've got to get the public on our side demanding these things. And you guys, every one of you that has had experience dealing with your local board of ed, or even serving on a local board or commission, you know that you want the public involved in the decision-making process. Because it's a battle if you're doing something that they don't want. So let's open it up. Let's start taking some questions. Just raise a hand and we'll go for it.
Wow, I love everything that you just said tonight. It's the first time I've ever speak. My question to you has to do with, so you seem like the kind of guy who can, get stuff done. Are you able to get in front of a camera? I'm thinking somebody who just get out there and just raise the rooftops and get somebody Channel 8, Channel 3, Channel 30 to listen to what you have to say, because so much I think of what you said, I don't think anybody knows it. Again, like where some of that, where the Republicans and they were with you and then they were against you and they were all for you and things like that. All this stuff we don't know as the people who are, you got your typical 9 to 5 and you come home and you got to take care of the dog and the kids and so on and so forth. Somebody who can just get out there and again, get on the 6 o'clock news or something, make a noise.
Okay, so the question is, can't somebody like me or someone else who's very strong on a particular issue or very active, approach the news media and get attention? And that's what we refer to in the business of campaigns as earned media, versus paid for media. The problem is that in this state, the news media is very biased. And you would not believe the amount of press that comes out of my office on a day-to-day basis. We put out, I would say, at least 1 to 3 press releases nearly every day. Okay? Every day. How many of those actually turn into something that gets printed in a newspaper or reported anywhere? I would say it's maybe 1 a week. And I'm doing way better than the average person. And that's because I've kind of become a spokesperson for the conservative wing of the Republican Party. So whenever the left-wing news media is looking for the red meat or someone to make an example of, they go to me. When the LGBTQ magazine is looking for a quote from a Republican, they don't go to one of my more moderate colleagues. They go to me because they know I'm going to say something that is going to fire up their people. But the answer is that the media is the ultimate decider of what they print and what they cover, not me. And we do try. And that's my great frustration. I mean, let's use the example of this election stuff that just happened. So they just brought us in for special session a couple weeks ago. And allegedly it was, to change the date of the presidential primary. But included in the language was a lot of election-related policy. So it was a ripe opportunity to bring up the issue of Bridgeport, which I did. And so did Gail. Gail went for quite a while in the House, making a strong case about how we need to actually address this issue of ballot fraud. And then I went for a couple hours in the Senate. And I thought I made a very, very passionate case for addressing this issue then and there while we were all there before this election takes place. And I offered amendments to get rid of drop boxes, to monitor drop boxes, to require identification in the process of absentee voting, to create criminal penalties for people that would violate election laws. And every one of those items was voted down on a party line. The Democrats voted against every one of those things. How many of you folks knew that? That's impressive that anybody knows, because the press didn't report that. The press reported that we unanimously passed a bill to create an election monitor in Bridgeport, which we didn't even do, because it had already been done in the state budget. And that's the problem, is that the actual information that matters that for our cause is not getting to people. And the people that deliver information are responsible. And of course, I started by talking about how we have an uphill battle, and we're the only thing that is in between, us and future destruction. But the fact of the matter is, the people on the left are smart. They started long ago, controlling education. They control everything. They control education, they control entertainment, they control the news media. They're effectively shaping our culture and changing the hearts and minds of people, and we have to work to overcome that. I think it's tremendous that people that share our values have any strength at all, given what we're up against. And that means that our values are good. Next question. Hank.
Hey, Bob, I mean to hug the floor off. I wonder if you could give us like a laundry list of some things folks like us can and should do going into the 2024 elections to get things like this going. Something into some things you talked about here. Tell us what you think. Seek out elections and there's endorsements. Ask our candidates in our districts for your support. So why not? We do it. Send a petition signed by a bunch of parents and citizens saying we hope you'll support this. We support you. Op-eds and everything you have done. Just speak what's going on outside. What do you think?
I think those are all necessary and great things, particularly things that impact people outside of our circle. I mean, the thing is, I could have came in here tonight and preached to you guys about the dangers of what's going on in our education system, but you all know that. Everybody here is aware of that. That's why we're here. We don't need to be reminded. What we need to do is find a way to get other people concerned about that and willing to support initiatives to make that change. Everything goes back to representative government, and I can't stress it enough. I'm very frustrated by a lot of things. I mean, social media, when it first came out, was actually a tremendous mechanism to start to communicate principles and values outside of your normal circle. You could actually reach people that you didn't know, or you knew at some distance, and they would hear and be involved in things. But when it comes to politics, people shut down. And now what has happened is that people are active, particularly in conservative politics. They tend to get themselves involved in things like, I'm trying to think of the Telegram, I think is one of them. Yep. You know, I think these are the most dangerous things on earth between you and me. They're fine as a device for communication, but what good is talking to a bunch of people that share our values on Telegram and spinning around all day long? I mean, we're not gaining anything by doing that. And in fact, it is used by the opposition to inject all sorts of conspiracies that ultimately make us look foolish. We've got to be careful for that. And we've got to get out of our comfort zone. If everybody in this room joined their local town committee, Republican or Democrat, and said, I'm going to be a part of the process of who we're choosing for candidates, of what our platform is for our local party, we could make a huge difference. I've seen it happen in towns across Connecticut, where a small group of people have gotten involved, and maybe it took them several cycles, but they go from being 3 people to being in control 5 years later, and dictating the way that RTC or DTC operates. That's what needs to happen. Also, there are so many groups. My friend Sue's here, she's Families for Freedom, another group to go along with FAIR and GECC and everyone, all these other like-minded folks. And that's great that these groups exist, and I think that they should, because they're ways for people to connect on a more local basis. I would encourage things like this, where we get to meet in person for one, because I think meeting people in person and being involved in something is a great way to get motivated and find ways to grab more people. And what you do is you challenge every person at this event, which is that next time we meet, you gotta bring someone. That's one way to get more people on our side. And we can create a chain reaction by doing so.
I'm thinking about the definition of representative government, and I love the idea, and I wish it was so, but I live in a place where I'm represented by 2 people who don't really represent me at all. And I have communicated with them with the thoughts and feelings that I have. One person I actually have interfaced with on a personal basis, very nice person, but walking in lockstep
Yeah, so the question is about representative government and the concern that what if you are not represented by your lawmakers, your House rep and your senator. My point about representative government is that those individuals were elected by people in the district. And it's easy to say that they were elected erroneously. You know, that people didn't really know where they stand. You know, it's just, they bamboozled everyone. But I don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot of bamboozling going on, and I certainly know a lot of Democratic candidates that come back home from Hartford and Washington and campaign in their district and sound just like Republicans. That happens a lot. But they all have a record, and that record can be challenged, it can be brought up, and maybe that's the biggest thing that I would recommend. But my point about representative government is not so much that you should expect to be represented. You should recognize that the reason why the people you have were elected is because your neighbors do not share your values. And that's what we have to change.
One other point I want to make is that there's so much apathy that, you know, we have a referendum in my town, and I think only out of 1,000 people in a city of 80,000, I don't know how many voted, made the difference and decided on an issue that affected the whole community. So I think part of the problem is the apathy, and how do we get people out to be concerned enough to watch it?
So the question is about apathy. And certainly that's kind of how we got in this mess. Probably everyone in this room is familiar with the cycle of civilization. They've seen this, you know, it starts with rebellion, and then you know, society grows and becomes prosperous as a new culture emerges. But over time, when people get fat and happy, they stop paying attention to their representatives, and their representatives start to be up to no good, and then before you know it, you have despotism, and you're ready for a new revolution. And maybe we're there, but we're still clearly in that apathetic zone where not too many people are paying attention because their daily lives are not impacted in a negative enough way to inspire them to action. And maybe that's frustrating, but I also think it means that it's easier because you have to do less work to overcome the opposition because they're just as apathetic as we are. Sadly, you know, I think in most of the country, I think that we actually have an advantage as conservative-minded people with traditional American principles. Certainly on the coasts in Connecticut, I think there's a lot more organization on the left, and they've done a very, very good job of activating their people. And money is the key to that. There's a lot to say. But it all goes back to, making sure that we use every last aspect of our individual ability as a citizen to hold our government accountable. And that means to applaud people that do good things. Because I will tell you that one of the frustrations I have, and I'm immune to it now because I'm used to getting slaughtered in the media, but I see some of my colleagues who are less inclined to join me all the time because they don't want to get beat up. But once in a while they do. I twist their arm enough and I get them to actually take that hard vote, and then no one stands by them and defends them. And we need to remember to do that. Instead of just constantly berating people in government, we have to, you know, acknowledge them when they do some good. And I can tell you that the House and Senate Republicans in Connecticut, not that there's a lot to go around, but when some of those folks actually make hard choices and they do the right thing, you have to go to them and say, great job, keep it up. I don't want to monopolize this microphone. You cut me off, whatever.
Oh, well, I mean, maybe two more questions?
Sure, 2 more questions.
What is frustrating is laws being violated every day by officials and nothing happens. What's our recourse?
It's the same thing. I heard you say that, Armand. I was thinking, I wrote down something when you said, I don't know. I wrote down the rule of law is gone, I think.
Yes.
Yes, and that's where we're at. The rule of law is gone. I mean, look at our streets. Look at the car thefts. Look at the madness. There's a cannibal they let out of a mental hospital in Waterbury that's 5 blocks from Gale. I had to hear about it the whole way here. Okay, I mean, this is what's going on. We have craziness going on in our system of government. But that's because the people that are in power do not share the same principles and values of the laws as written. So they don't honor them. I've sued this governor and his predecessor on grounds that were absolutely just. And if I tell you about them, you're going to agree with me, and you say there's no way the court could find against you. Most recently, I sued Ned Lamont because during the COVID pandemic, he decided to shut down some businesses. The argument being, I have executive authority, it's an emergency, so I get to decide which businesses are essential and which businesses are not essential, and I get to tell them that they are closed. That's baloney. The Constitution of the state of Connecticut is very clear that the governor has emergency powers, but they only extend as far as modifying existing laws for public health purposes. That's it, modifying existing laws. We don't have any law that allows the government to shut down businesses. We don't have any law that determines who's essential and who's non-essential. He's well beyond the realm of the constitutional authority, and he's into the realm of making laws, which very clearly in our Constitution is the realm of the legislature and the legislature alone. And they dismissed my case. They dismissed my case for standing. Okay? Now, who has more standing than a lawmaker when somebody else is making laws?
Exactly. So,
Unlawful.
okay, so last question. One more. Anybody? Okay. Chris.
Mr. Donnell.
Rob, we're the best, Rob. Rob, you mentioned that the GOP is the only institution that I feel like has the power to stand up to what most of us are. It's well documented that, and I agree with it, it's well documented, I think, that religiosity these days in the U.S. is on a down, well down. And it seems to me not as well documented, but you can pretty easily make the argument that for many people, political allegiance has kind of taken that space, right? So for them, their allegiance to a party or an idea has the sort of force that it might have in the past for religious belief. And so, and then I think about those two facts, and I think about the fact that the little rural town that I live in Connecticut, I know for a fact that philosophically, a supermajority of voters agree with the sort of things we're talking about today. But historically, they've always been registered Democrats. And I know that for many of them, it's almost an emotional issue to vote against a party that they were bred by their parents to believe is the party they should vote for. And so, do you have any practical advice about how we break down that particular dynamic as one way of hoping to advance the cause for voting convenience?
So the question is about how to, I would say, convert lifelong Democrats into Republican voters. Is that pretty close?
Yes, absolutely. Generationally, right?
Yeah. So the question was a little more complicated, and I will try and do it justice in my answer. But the only answer I have is hard work. But I'm living proof that hard work works. In 2010, I ran for state representative in the 80th Assembly District, and that was a district that was held by a Democrat who had served 4 terms and defeated his previous Republican opponent 90% to 10%. And his previous Republican opponent was not a slouch. He was the town committee chairman, and not that he was a strong campaigner by any means, but he ran a real campaign. He raised money, he put out signs, he went door to door, he did everything that people do in a political campaign, and he still got slaughtered, 90% to 10%. And when I ran for office in 2010, people thought I was crazy. My dear friend Joe Markley had told several other people who had contemplated running for that seat not to bother, that it was not winnable. But I didn't know Joe at the time, so he didn't get to tell me that. And I was just stupid enough to do it. But the way I won that race was because in that district, and the reason why I'm bringing it up in response to your question, is that district was almost entirely made up of moderate Democrats, lifelong Kennedy Democrats, senior citizens. Your typical Irish Catholic, salt of the earth Democrats. And they had been voting for Corky for the last 10 years. And as far as they were concerned, the Democrat Party was still the party of Kennedy and their view of America. I used the fact that it was the Obama mid-year to change their mind. And I went door to door and I would start to talk to people and they're like, oh, you're a Republican, go away, I'd never vote for a Republican. And I'd say, you know, what's so great about the Democrat Party? And they would start talking to me about things and I'm like, well, I share those values. You're talking about hard work, you're talking about a merit-based society, you're talking about, you know, wait a second here, you voted for Obama? And then they would give me this look, you know? And I knew right then and there that I had him. I was like, Obama's not your guy, is he? He doesn't stand for the things that you believe in. And we would have a conversation. I'd tell him, your party left you a long time ago. You gotta start paying attention. And I don't wanna preach that whole argument because everyone in this room knows it. But that's how it's done. And in the end, I won that election by 45 votes. And even on election night, I remember standing at Wolcott High School, the biggest voting district in the town, across from Corky. We both got there at exactly 6 a.m. and we stayed there until 8 p.m. We never left, not for 5 minutes, because we knew it was going to be a hard-fought race. And he was still telling me, even at like 5 minutes to 8, before the polls closed, well, you did a good job. You know, I think you put up a real hell of a fight. Assuming that there was no way on earth I was going to defeat him. But I did. And we can do that all over the place if people are willing to put their heart and their soul into changing the hearts and minds of other people. That's how politics is done. I'll just leave you with this. There are so many magic bullets out there. People are talking about all kinds of things all the time. Term limits is one that drives me crazy. No offense to the Convention of States folks over there. But term limits, for me, is the exact opposite of what needs to happen. We have term limits already. It's election day. The thing about election day is on election day, we get to fight it out about who ran a better campaign, who convinced their voters to turn out, who was right on the issues. We get to do that. When you have term limits, you don't get to do that anymore. And people get lazy. They go, we're just going to get rid of Nancy Pelosi because she's term limited in 2 more years. There's no point in actually fighting for her. And you know what happens is, when you don't have to go out and fight for hearts and minds and principles, you don't. And consequently, you do not change the hearts and minds of the people in that district, and they just end up electing a different Nancy Pelosi. We had Chris Dodd in this state for 20 plus years. And when Chris Dodd went away, what did we get? Chris Murphy. That was a big improvement. Now, of course, he wasn't term limited. There's a million other things, and I don't need to harp on term limits. And it's not so much that I'm adamantly against the concept. The point is, we cannot replace a magic bullet that somehow, a court case. See what happens when the courts are not on our side, to Armin's point. The judges are appointed by Democrat politicians in this state. Who's their allegiance to? You'd think it should be to the rule of law. I can give you countless examples where it's not. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. A lot of good points were brought up, and I just want to emphasize, if you haven't already, sign up on our list, because through the email newsletter that we'll put out and other means where we'll communicate with you on that list, we'll be addressing these issues, such as what do you do when you're not well represented in your district? And what do you do when you've got people that you have to persuade? One point I just want to add to this is that from where I sit, in the last, I'm going to say 3 years, there's been a rise of what we'll call conservative media in Connecticut. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to give a shout out to Sally Fink, who is here. Thank God for Sally. That's right. And the Continental Tribune. Then we also have the Connecticut Sentinel. And my nighttime job is the publisher of Yankee T News. And it's surprising how many people make up this, well, almost underground conservative media in the state. So there's a challenge to draw it together. And I'll just mention that my partner in crime, Oliver Augustin from the New Haven RTC, put together a signal channel just for Connecticut media. and the list continues to grow. And then the point is to get people together and encourage each other to keep growing conservative media in the state, because that's going to be part of the answer to the things that Senator Sampson brought up. Okay, Bob, it is your moment. Here is Bob McGuffey, who is our best shot yet against Jim Himes in the Congress.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Rob Sampson, still here. I'm from Fairfield, and I'm a proud capitalist, and I'm running my campaign on constitutional principles. So I appreciate the opportunity for you having me up here. First, I stand foursquare with the parents' rights movement. There's several great groups down in the 4th District, and I've been to all of them, and I am completely aligned with their principles. I've got a few things here. I just wanted to bullet out so you get an idea of who I am. I'm taking on Jim Himes. You guys probably hear about him. He fills your TV screen a little more these days because Hakeem Jeffries is pushing him out there to carry the water because Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell are damaged goods. Pelosi's on the back bench. So Himes is out there. If you're watching, he's always looking nervous. He knows he's lying. In the larger picture for my campaign, the real theme of it is, and I've got a speech on it, I'm going to let rip in the right forum, is that the Democrat policies are shrinking American life in every way possible. That's what they're doing. They're shrinking us back. Inflation is 40% on the things we need to live, right? High energy costs permeate through the entire society. Everything is impaired now by the higher energy costs. Higher gas costs, killing our mobility, really restricting our mobility. Everybody in this room has probably decided, maybe I won't do that. Higher interest rates. They're impairing people from moving up in houses or buying any houses. Mortgage interest rates are higher. The average payment in this country for a new car is $750 a month now, and a used car, $540. This is shrinking American life right from under us. Credit card debt is at an all-time high. Why? People are using that to bridge the gap. And everybody just keeps going along. See, there were producer price interest numbers today, up higher than they thought they were going to be. Unemployment is low. Oh, they brag about unemployment low. Why, folks? Why? Because people are working 2 or 3 jobs to keep up. They're sucking up all those extra jobs that are out there because of what I'm talking about. This is what's being done to this country by the Democrats and their policies. Jim Himes, Rosa DeLauro, all 5 of them in the House in this state, and the 2 senators. They are responsible for this. They are delivering this to us. College costs, forget it. And now we're at a point where, why would you send your child to one of these colleges anyway? People are juggling food, rent, health care. Anybody on a break-even budget is giving things up. The purchasing power of the dollar is being depreciated. And if our enemies get their way, they will tank it. The key is the petrodollar. If the petrodollar gets eclipsed, the value of the dollar in this country is going to go down. People, we will be in another depression. We need to be a down. That is what we're facing. I'm a finance guy, and I know it. So Jim Himes, like Rosa DeLauro, is enabling this entire catastrophe, and it has to be stopped. We don't have to take it. We just don't have to take it, and people in this room realize that's why you're here. So I'll be going through the 4th District. That is the underpinning for whatever I address. No matter what we could talk about in society, it comes back to our lives are shrinking. And they're perfectly happy to have it. They'll have us eating bugs. We've heard of that?
Sure.
Yeah, go and Stop and Shop now, right? They used to butcher their own meats. You could buy something of the size of portion you wanted. Now it's all vacuum packed from somewhere else, and it's $20 or more for a steak or whatever. What's going on? They just redid our Stop and Shop in Fairfield. definitely has less product on the shelves. You can't find a sponge. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing. They're disappearing on the shelves. They're just closing the shelves. Life is shrinking in many ways. So to set the tone for this group, parents interested group, I have two things to say to level set. Let's dissolve the Federal Department of Education completely. What do they do there? What do they do there? There's not a teacher involved. What are they doing there? And the other part of it is, and I'd love to take Himes on and see, we'll see where the groups fall out. No minor under the age of 18 should be allowed to have their body mutilated or drugged to transition the gender from one to the other. No way! No way. And any Republican in this state that can't stand on that, and there are plenty that won't, they need their heads examined, they need to get a new job. I mean, that's the issue. That's the issue. And it's a winner for us, big time. There's a wedge being driven in this society between parents and the children. And that's a big part of it. It's been going through the schools, the education system since Gramsci was propagated through the teacher colleges in the 50s and 60s. Kids are taught that the country is racist, that so everybody's either an oppressed or an oppressor. It's awful what they're telling the kids to do. You know that. Kids are being pressured to accept this woke ideology. This is all got to stop. We got this issue. People are with us. You get in front of a group of people, you win this argument. Teacher unions have abandoned representing the children or the educationals. They are shock troops for marching through the institution today. And that's what they're doing. They need to be challenged, Board of Eds, PTAs, every place you can challenge them. It's our issue. I mean, do Democrat politicians really think that the schools have a right to discuss changing genders with a kid without their parents knowing about it? It's abhorrent. No way, no way. The children are our children, not the schools. And all these Democrats, there's 5 Democrat representatives in this state, they all voted against the Parents' Bill of Rights. That was teed up in the Congress. All of them, none of them, there was a denouncement of socialism bill that McCarthy teed up in February. None of these guys would denounce socialism. The 5 of them, Himes, DeLauro, Courtney, Hayes, and Larson. All of them. It's pathetic. They voted against expanding energy. They voted against the Secure the Border Act. All of them, the 5 of them. It's unbelievable what they've done. Their records alone, I'm going to hang this around Himes' head. I will find every communication vector in the 4th District to get this message out. It's coming, because in addition to the publications Court mentioned, there's the Connecticut Examiner, the Connecticut Sun, and the Connecticut Sentinel. They're all online, and you can find them, and people are reading them. But there's local radio stations you can get on, there's local blogs. So we will fight this entire agenda, and let's make no mistake, these issues are issues. This is the hill to make them die on, make the left die on. Not us, them. So thank you.
My man. Wait, hey, what? Oh, the fundraiser? Oh yes, by the way, wait, where are we holding the fundraiser? Here?
VFW.
The VFW in
Guilford.
November 16th at the VFW in Guilford. We will be holding a fundraiser for Bob. Bring your checkbooks, empty out your bank accounts, get all the pennies and nickels you can out of the sofa, and let's help him, because you got a formidable opponent when it comes to fundraising, right? I don't have to tell you that, right? Okay, so just this could be the conclusion, or maybe if some people had some questions or comments they wanted to add at this point. Ma'am.
I wanted to talk to your point. You had mentioned that there's only 1,000 So
You
it
know,
really only takes, I can speak louder.
Okay.
It really only takes, you getting 4 or 5 other people active in the local, RTC or GTC or whatever, or, getting those people active, because just having 5 voices to go when only 1,000 people out of 80,000 show up for things, you can be very vocal. So it doesn't take a lot of people just to come. So I just want to encourage you.
Right. I would add to that when those 4 or 5 people can work as a team and are very determined, they can definitely punch above their weight, for sure. Any other?
What town are you in? Danbury?
Okay. All right. So I think people are beginning to call it a night. Thanks for being here.
Mention the table, the books.
And yes, Armin's table here. This is the work of a hardworking man. You do not want to miss this. The best part, of course, is he wrote the book. You saw how thick that is. He also produced a 93-page document, which he simply refers to as the booklet. Seriously. Anyway, feel free to get them there. They're on the table. The books are $15. The booklet's free. Some other literature. So definitely check it out.
Colleen Roberts' book, too.
Oh yes, and Colleen Roberts, who's a fantastic writer and speaker. Okay, well, I've done my part. Thank you very much, folks. It's been a great time.